With the first light of morning, the forest came alive. The sound of birds, sunlight filtering through the leaves, the scent of damp earth, these were the things that filled Murat's heart each morning as he began his work. He had spent years in forestry, the wooden handle of his axe worn into the shape of his grip. No one questioned his work ethic. Everyone in the village knew him. The first to rise, the last to return home, the forestry company had hired 2 new men that year. One had been paired with Murat, Kerem, a man in his early 30s, calm in manner, measured in everything he did. Murat had sized him up at first glance, or so he thought. This man won't be able to keep up with me, he had told himself. Look at him, always taking breaks, and indeed, Kerem worked differently. He started a little later than Murat each morning, retreated to the shade of a tree at noon, ate his meal, closed his eyes, and sometimes took something out of his bag and tinkered with it. In the evenings, he would stop as soon as darkness began to fall. When Murat saw this pace, he had quietly rejoiced. At the end of the week, they would count how many trees each had felled and compare. The competition was clear. Throughout the week, Murat had pushed himself beyond his limits. His shoulders ached, his hands blistered, but he didn't stop. One thing alone occupied his mind: produce, produce, produce. Taking a break was a waste of time. Every minute meant a tree cut or a tree not cut. There were days he started before dawn. When he left the village, the darkness had not yet fully lifted. Kerem, meanwhile, simply stopped when his hours came. During his breaks, he sometimes rotated his wrist in slow circles, sometimes closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Murat interpreted this as exhaustion. The man is worn out, gasping for air. But the more he observed, the more he noticed something. Kerem didn't look tired. On the contrary, in the final hours of the day, he swung with the same clean strokes as in the first. Murat, on the other hand, was expending more and more energy as the day went on, yet getting less and less out of it. He didn't admit this to himself, of course. Sometimes people develop an instinctive resistance to seeing the truth, especially when that truth shakes their beliefs. Friday evening arrived. Reckoning day, they both counted the trees they had felled. The expression on Murat's face was hard to put into words, a mixture of shock, anger, and disappointment. Kerem had cut more trees, not just a little more, noticeably more. How is this possible? Murat asked, his voice flat and sharp. I started earlier than you every day. I finished later than you every day. I didn't even take a lunch break. I worked harder. I worked harder under every kind of condition. And yet you cut more trees. There must be an explanation. Kerem looked at him. His gaze held neither triumph nor condescension, only a quiet understanding. There is, he said slowly. There's no secret, really. While you were working without stopping, I was resting now and then and sharpening my axe. Murat froze. You were sharpening your axe? Yes, during every break. Sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 15. A sharp axe cuts far deeper with the same force. A dull axe, no matter how hard you swing, gives you less and less. In fact, it wears you down, both the wood and the arm. Murat said nothing on his walk home that evening, but something inside him was settling, unraveling. The deep fatigue in his shoulders that he had carried since morning now felt different. It wasn't only the weariness of his muscles, it was the weariness of having made a mistake, of having misunderstood. For years he had confused working more with working more productively. Work was a good thing, no question, but neglecting the instrument used for work, the mind, the body, the methods led inevitably to collapse in the long run. Understanding this felt like a small revolution for Murat. But do we truly understand when we read this story, or do we merely nod our heads? What Kerem did during his breaks was the act of sharpening the axe. It was also a moment of conscious stillness, stepping back from the flow of the day, asking, what am I doing, and how am I doing it? The question sounds simple, but most of us avoid asking it, because stopping feels like weakness, because society has taught us that stopping is idleness. Yet within stopping, a great act is hidden. Stop and look. Stop and listen. Stop and assess. This assessment is embedded in a phrase inscribed at the entrance to the famous Temple of Apollo at Delphi, etched into humanity's memory for centuries. Noticeably, know thyself. These two words were at the very center of Socrates' thinking, not the center of philosophy, but the center of living. For Socrates, an unexamined life was not worth living. What does it mean to know yourself? The first answer that comes to mind is superficial, knowing your strengths and weaknesses. But this definition falls short. Knowing yourself is, in truth, a far deeper process of integration. Knowing yourself means closing the gap between how you see yourself and how others see you. Most of us carry a belief about ourselves. I am patient, I am honest, I have the potential to be a good leader, but the people around us may see us very differently. As that gap widens, our connection to reality weakens. The decisions we make lose their effectiveness, our relationships crack, we drift further from our goals. Knowing yourself means seeing the road between where you are now and where you want to be. You cannot set out on a journey without drawing the map. You cannot know where you are going without knowing where you stand. This is as much a geographical truth as it is an existential one. Knowing yourself means questioning the real motivations behind your actions. Was Murat avoiding rest because he genuinely wanted to be productive? Or was he feeding off the perception of, I am working harder, ego, or efficiency? Being able to distinguish between the two is one of the most critical dimensions of self-knowledge. Modern psychology reframes this ancient wisdom under the concept of self-awareness. Research shows that people with high self-awareness make better decisions, build healthier relationships, experience greater job satisfaction, and cope with stress more effectively. The impact is significant not only at the individual level but at the level of leadership as well. Leaders with developed self-awareness inspire stronger commitment and performance from their teams, but self-awareness does not come on its own. Just as Kerem retreated regularly each day to sharpen his axe, self-awareness develops through intentional practice. What does this practice look like? Daily reflection. Set aside a few minutes at the end of each day. What did you do? What decisions did you make? What lay behind those decisions? Those who do this regularly gradually build a powerful library of insight. They begin to recognize their own patterns, their triggers, their sharp edges, and their dull ones, seeking feedback. One of the most powerful tools for self-awareness is asking people you trust directly. How do you see me? What could I do differently? These are difficult questions because the ego resists, but growth begins on the other side of that resistance, questioning assumptions. Murat's core assumption was working longer means producing more. This assumption had never been questioned. Yet beneath every belief we hold, such assumptions lie waiting. Bringing them to the surface is akin to sharpening the sharpest part of the axe, silence and space. The rarest thing in the digital age is silence. We have grown so accustomed to stimuli, notifications, sounds, and images that we have stopped hearing our own inner voice. Silence is not an escape, it is the doorway back to yourself. Let us return to our story. The following week, Murat tried something different. Reluctantly at first, telling himself this is a waste of time, but he tried. He stopped at noon. He discovered this. The axe had truly gone dull. More importantly, he had been striking at the wrong angle, a habit built up over years, one he had never even noticed. A little attention, a small correction. That afternoon, he felt it for the first time. He was using less force, yet cutting deeper. This was not a small, momentary change. It was a fundamental restructuring of the way he worked, and the trigger had been one thing alone: stopping and looking. If sharpening our axe in personal life looks like this, how does it appear in professional life? Organizations can fall prey to the same Murat syndrome. A rhythm of rushing from meeting to meeting, leaping from email to email, putting out one fire only to race toward the next. Constant motion, constant action, but toward what? Why? While caught inside this rhythm, it feels nearly impossible to stop and ask, is this speed taking us in the right direction? The most successful organizations have turned this into institutional practice. Retrospectives, annual retreats, individual coaching, structured feedback loops, all of these are mechanisms for sharpening the organizational axe. The result is not faster progress, but sharper progress, and perhaps the deepest question of all, in which area of your life are you working with a dull axe? Perhaps it is a relationship. You may be caught in the same cycle, having the same argument over and over, yet never stopping to ask, what is my role in this cycle? Perhaps it is a career decision. You may have been running in one direction for years, exhausted, yet never pausing to ask, is this the right direction? Because stopping invites uncertainty, and uncertainty frightens us, perhaps it is a habit. You may not be taking good care of your body, your mind, your energy because you tell yourself, there is no time, but working without enough sleep, enough rest, enough nourishment is like walking into the forest with a dull axe. Socrates' call, Know Thyself, arrives like a letter from thousands of years ago, and its contents are surprisingly current. Stop, look, ask, where are you right now? Where do you want to be? What is widening the distance between these 2 points? And most importantly, which assumptions are keeping you fixed in place? Asking these questions requires courage. The answers are not always comfortable, but without these questions being asked, true progress is not possible. The story of Murat and Kerem is not, at its heart, a story of competition. It is a story of awareness, and its most beautiful quality is this: Murat learns at the story's end. Accepting that is his most powerful move. Being open to learning is itself a form of self-awareness. Saying, I may be wrong, is perhaps the sharpest form of inner honesty. The 2 men in the forest resemble 2 voices within us. One says, stop, rest, slow down, this is a waste of time. The other, with a quieter but wiser voice, says, stop, look, sharpen, this is gain. Which voice we listen to determines not only how many trees we cut, but what kind of person we become. Sharpen your axe, regularly, deliberately, patiently, because a sharp mind is far more powerful than a sharp axe.